Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris,
And I'm Rob.
and we're going to be deviating a little bit from the normal stuff that we talk about because we kind of want to talk about more of a real world thing, a more recent thing, and it's all and just really just a topic for general debate.
Yeah, don't worry, we're not getting political on this one.
No, it's not anything like that. I mean, I'm sure people will be divided on whatever it is that we have to say because that's just the way the world is right now. But I just think it'll be a really cool thing to speak about, and I am also curious to see how others feel about this too. We're talking about AI in art, and that translates to more than just pictures and images. We mean the whole thing, anything in the arts creative space, and AI. How does this work? What are the pros and cons for it? Why would somebody do this? Is there ever a justifiable reason to use this? When is it okay? When is it not okay? When do you cross the line? That sort of stuff. But if you don't know what we are, if this is your first time listening to the show, we are Why Does This Exist? We are a podcast that talks about the very weirdest pop culture. Normally, we do movies, music, and some TV shows or anything more general like that, video games, etc. Today, we just kind of decided we would try something a little bit different. So if you like it, let us know. If you don't like it, then feel free to tell us to go suck a big one. That's the news. Here's the weather. You are now about to witness the true strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues. So let's get on with the goddamn show.
Now we're replacing Chris with AI.
Yeah, don't do. Well, I don't know. Maybe do that. I don't really care.
So that way,
we're just gonna train an algorithm at this point, and
the botches will probably be worse.
Oh God, yeah, the LLMs will be terrible. Actually, I have a voice clone with Respeecher, and yeah, I do have it. It's kind of weird. I was doing it just to experiment with it to see if I could make passive income.
Yeah.
That way, and two, just I kind of wanted to see what a voice clone of myself sounded like. How good was the technology?
Yeah.
And is it even anything that I should be concerned about right now?
Well, it's definitely getting better, I would say.
It is getting better. Every time they upgrade it, it gets a little bit better, but it's still not really there yet.
Yeah, there's still an uncanny valley thing about it, and I noticed it. So when it first came out a few years ago, for some reason Joe Rogan is one of the most like AI cloned voices there is, because I guess they use like fake clips of his show and him talking to sell products, right? So that's like the big thing.
He also just has so many hours of content that it's easy to train a model on.
Yeah, exactly. So I started seeing the Joe Rogan things a lot. I guess probably because I listened to JRE a lot. So and I noticed when it first came out, it was very easy to tell. It sounded like him, but had none of his inflection, none of his anything. It was awful. But I noticed more recently they are actually starting to get inflections right with the AI software.
Yes, that's
and their speech patterns. It's not just their voice anymore.
No, it's getting better slowly but surely. Some companies AI models are better than others.
Yeah.
But it varies between terrible to pretty damn good.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
they're getting it's still not perfect. You could still tell the nuances. You'd still be able to tell that it's AI. It really can't do
Yeah.
it can't really do emotions very well.
No. And I think that's going to be a problem with AI for a while is the uncanny valley aspect of it. And it goes from anything from art to the voice synthesis to anything that's generated by AI really.
But let me tell you, when it's neutral, it can sometimes be very, very good.
Yeah.
When I was first testing out the model, I gave it some stuff to read because sometimes before we go to bed, the missus will, she'll just ask me to just either talk about something, probably Magic the Gathering, so that she could go to sleep. Just
Yeah.
any topic that she's not crazy about, or just like, or
Something boring. Something that will bore her to
so,
sleep.
yeah, exactly, something that will bore her. Like, tell me about wrestling, and then she'll be out in 2 minutes. Or one day we were having a conversation, and then I didn't tell her that I was programming. I didn't tell her that I was testing out the model. She just knew that it existed and that I was working
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah.
So I put in whatever it was that I was doing, but whatever I told it to do, whatever text that I copied and pasted, and then I just threw it in there, and then I let it read for I put about maybe like 4 minutes of text or something, so it would just read it nonstop, and I just looked over at her with my mouth closed, not saying anything, just waving, and but she's heard me talking through the
Yeah.
AI model, and she just said, "Oh no, this is scary. I don't like this."
Yeah. Yeah. It can be scary.
I
And I
mean,
think,
it's good for pranking people in that regard,
well, going off
but
of that,
it's
it's going to cause a lot of fraud. There,
yes,
there was
it
a
is going to
scam
get a
going,
lot of problems.
there was a scam going around a couple of years ago. Um, and actually, my grandmother was a victim of this scam where
Oh
somebody
no.
called her pretending to be me, saying that I was in jail and I needed bail money.
Oh
That
Jesus.
I was driving down to Maryland and I got pulled over and I was speeding and I got thrown in jail. And of course, she knew it wasn't me. Like that, she could tell by the voice it wasn't me.
Right. She also would know whether or not you needed to go to Maryland.
Exactly. Uh,
And if
so
you were in Maryland that day.
yes. So she saw right through it. The problem
Right.
is that the AI voice modeling is getting better and better by the year, and you're going to have these scammers stealing people's voices to scam old people that don't tell the difference. Because for some reason, I think it's just because old people aren't tech savvy. They're not really on the internet that much. They're the biggest victims of AI fraud.
Right. Well, the
You
big
know,
current victims of AI fraud, I
yeah.
think I think once you and I are old people, because we're still because because we've
We
had
grew
the
up.
internet for
We
quite
grew
some
up with
time now.
technology. Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't think that these scams will be as good as they are now.
Well, it's
I mean,
only going to get better.
I'm not saying that. No, I don't mean these scams specifically, but I mean there will be general. They'll have to try different scams. Like the scams of today will not work on you and I.
I
But
think
the scams of
eventually,
tomorrow, I
well,
don't know what
yeah,
they're going to be.
especially because I think eventually AI is going to be indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah, which I think is the. I think that's the hope of these companies.
Yes, it's not there yet. It's probably got another 10 to 20 years. And honestly, I don't think it's really going to happen until we get an artificial general intelligence, which, that could be anywhere from 10 to 40 years away, depending on, well, we don't know what the government has in the military, but
Yeah, some people say 5 years. I don't think that we're going to reach it at that point, or
based on how the
at least that it won't be available to the masses by
no.
then.
And based on how stupid large language models can be, I really think we're still pretty far off. I think
Right.
we're not going to see an artificial general intelligence until we figure out quantum computing.
Right. I was going to say the general intelligence is true AI, where the
Yes.
AI right now is just really a buzzword and it's a glorified chatbot,
Yes, exactly.
which is also ethically and economically, it is a big waste of money. All it is a money pit at this point. It's the burn rate is insane for
Well,
these
let's see.
companies.
That's the thing is that it's right now. It's almost like an arms race with like the Manhattan Project. Everyone's trying to like hit it big with AI and make the next best AI model, and then eventually achieve getting an artificial general intelligence. So companies are going to rise and fall because it's like the boom thing right now. It's the same thing with the dot-com bubble back in the early 2000s. Like the internet was a new thing and everybody was trying to capitalize on it. And that's what happens when
Right.
a new technology comes out.
Or a new anything, really.
Yeah. So I
There's
think,
no there's always a very there's always an unstable boom period.
yeah, when it comes to art, I think right now, again, it's getting better. It still has that uncanny valley aspect to it, especially if you're trying to generate like photographs. If you're doing like cartoons, I think it works fairly well. There's still some jankiness to it, and AI, much like human beings, has a big problem drawing hands. So the hands are always a big
Yes.
tell. Um,
Yes, the hands are always problematic. You'll see there's issues with lines
yes,
a lot, or if you're asking it to do certain if you're asking it to draw certain things, there's specific shapes that it's just there's specific shapes and angles that it's not good with.
yes,
And that's really what it is. It's pretty good with colors and it's pretty good with studying whatever of adapting to mimic whatever it is that's available that you've asked it to reference if
yeah,
you've given it a reference. But you can tell that that this person it's not new, it's not new undiscovered work by Jackson Pollock basically, or it's not a new painting by Leonardo da Vinci that was
y-
undiscovered. It's
yeah,
you could tell that it's AI. You could tell that it's in the style. And also if you're the person who is behind the prompt, it is never going to give you exactly what you ask for and you have to keep refining it. And
yes,
even then, it's still not going to really get you what you asked for.
yeah. I think.
For example, I was using Mid Journey for just concept art or just
Mhm.
I wanted to see what exactly it could do. So I told it to give me I told it to give me zombies ice skating in a burning church or something like that. Something crazy.
Yeah.
Or or zombies playing hockey in a graveyard, I think. And it gave me that a little bit. Like
Mhm.
it gave me some cool stuff. And then I started getting a little bit more specific where I said, make this look like an 80s metal album. Give me acrylic colors. Make it look like something Ed Repka did.
Yeah.
Or give me, or make it look like Raymond Swanlin's art. Or Ron Spencer's. Or Jim Lee. Or just random artists. Make this look like a Spider Man comic from 1994.
Mhm.
Right? It must look like Todd McFarlane's Spider Man.
Yeah.
And it would just give me it would just it would take random words and it would just do things to them. It would just do things to the image that I did not ask it to do.
Mhm.
Um, for examples, if I said make it look like Jim Lee's X-Men, suddenly the zombies hockey jerseys would all have X's on them.
Yeah. Yeah, there's
I
certain things that it doesn't understand. And and again, this is part of it being related to a large language model where it's actually it's almost like a Boolean search engine that it's using. So it just sees
yes,
the letter X. It's not actually connecting it to X-Men. So it's like, "Oh, you want a letter X in your painting." It's
right.
not smart enough to realize, "No, I want X like I want it to look like this specific X-Men comic."
Right, and none of them looked like Jim Lee stuff, by the way. The
Yeah.
Greg Capullo Batman stuff was a little bit better, but it just made them. It made all the zombies look like bats for some reason,
Yeah,
and that wasn't. Although it looked cool, it wasn't what I asked for.
yeah.
Or it would, and it couldn't
It's
get
way
the
too
hot.
literal when it comes to
Yeah.
like things like that.
Well, there's some things that it just can't. It just will not do, get right. Like
Right.
it couldn't do it almost never did the hockey sticks right. There were some hockey sticks where there was the curved part of there was the main part of the stick on both sides, so it looked more like a giant boomerang.
Yeah.
And clearly, it's not a hockey stick. Or if I told it, give give me a zombie driving a zamboni, it could not draw a proper zamboni.
Yeah.
It just gave me it just looked like sleds most of the time.
And it really depends on the AI that you're using, because I've noticed that the Bing, the Microsoft AI image generator, actually works pretty good. It still has some of those weird quirks that you're describing, but I found it to be more accurate than the Midjourney stuff that I've done.
Yeah, Midjourney was fun if you're just trying to get a basic thing and you're not asking for too much, but once you start asking for too much, you can't really do it.
Yeah, yeah. Midjourney is. But I think Midjourney kind of has the luxury of being one of the first like popular ones,
Mhm.
especially I think
It's
when it
good, but you can't get too specific. Once you
right.
get too specific, it just kind of fries up.
Yeah.
It's almost like a bad intern who just decides to quit.
Or takes things too literally and just
Or just loses it and fucks the project up on purpose because they don't work there anyway.
yeah. Um so yeah, I think and I really think it also depends on what kind of art style you're going for. I think more abstract art works better. If you're trying to do something that's more concrete and more like, oh, I want a picture of a dude playing guitar or something, it's going to get weird, because it gets weird, like I said, with hands. I think if you say you want a picture of a mountain lake somewhere or a landscape, it works a little bit better doing landscape work.
Mhm.
And it's
Yes,
probably just because
landscapes
landscapes are
is
just
very
easier to
good.
do. Yeah, landscapes I think are just easier to do, and that goes even for human artists.
Yeah,
Um,
it will give yeah, it gives you good scenes, but
yeah,
it can't give you proper concepts.
yeah. Uh, so the big controversy, of course, with AI art is that it steals from other artists to, or I wouldn't say steals, because it's not like it's breaking into a museum and taking a picture off the wall. It borrows from the style of other artists, especially like you said, when you put it in to say, oh, I want this to look like something Ed Repka would draw. So it's going to look up Ed Repka's work online and see, okay, this is what Ed Repka's stuff looks like. I'm going to draw it like this.
Once in a
So
blue moon, it will get it right, but for the most
yeah,
part, it's not really there.
yeah, and so now the big controversy, of course, is that artists are complaining and they're saying, you're stealing my work. Um,
Like what I've noticed is the less specific you are, the better that it will give you.
yeah,
Because I guess it just has more resources if you're vague.
which kind of makes sense. If the more specific you get, the less it has to draw from. You know,
Hmm.
because if you say, "Oh, I want it to look like something Ed Repka will do," for example, it's only going to look at Ed Repka's art, which yeah, he is a pretty prominent artist, but he doesn't have thousands of millions of paintings to go off of. He has
Right.
whatever his and really whatever's available online for it to look for.
Yep.
uh, so I think it it's hard to say whether it's like stealing or not, because again, it's just drawing from to influence. And would you say someone's stealing if they were inspired by Ed Repka to draw something in their own house, and they drew it themselves and it looked like Ed Repka's work, would you say, oh, well, you stole it from Ed Repka? It's like, no, you were just
No,
inspired
that's
by it.
clearly inspired by. But
Right.
I
So,
think once, well, I think because I think because it falls into the hands of a company and it's where
yeah,
it's drawing it from because it's drawing this stuff from copyrighted work. Now,
right.
if it's lifting, if it's doing things where it gets hairy because they're making money off of what they're of what they're grabbing the information from. Um, that's kind of where it is. It's because someone is making money off of it and it's not the artist that gets people upset, which you can argue that the person who gets inspired to paint this thing by the other artist and then sells that off could be to a degree the same thing. You could argue that, but that's not true. Most
Right.
people would say, "Oh, okay, cool. They just went through an Ed Repka phase for
Hmm.
this set of things. That's really neat." And they would accept it and they would accept that. Whereas people don't like it when you're doing it when you're using AI for it, and it's also how you're using the AI. Like if you're selling it, if someone does an AI prompt, prints it out on a canvas, and then sells it to an art museum and just they make an art exhibit out of it, and then that piece goes for something, it's not even considered modern art or avant-garde. It's they're saying, wow, you stole this art.
Yeah, but at the same time, going off of that, where do you draw the line? Because you could
Yes,
say the
that
same thing about digital art.
yes,
If someone uses a computer to generate a fractal, and uses that as a piece of artwork, can you say, oh, well, you didn't really draw that, you're a hack? A-
right. Well,
AI, if
the
AI, I
other
think
thing
it's
is
just a tool.
it's one thing if you're ripping it direct if you're lifting it directly from another artist's
Right.
work, which
Yeah.
there has been which there have been issues with more famously in the past, I think, year or so. There's been an issue with a Magic the Gathering artist for they noticed this with the card Trouble in Pairs in the Karlov Manor set,
Hmm.
and they noticed that the artist, their art style is this weird digital modern thing where they take pieces from other things and they almost take a punk approach and they take pieces that don't belong and they fit them together from other things. But they did this for cards with other art that other artists did. So they took pieces from different pieces of art that already exist. So, for example, they took hands from other cards, or they took faces from
Right.
from another card and slapped it on there and passed it off as their design and sold this. That's and I don't know what's going on with them, but they got the riot act and they're probably not working with. I'm sure Wizards is not working with them anymore, and they also found other cards. It wasn't even like this happened before. This happened with other pieces of work that they did
Right.
where it just was a pattern and this person was just literally stealing pieces of art for their art and passing it off as their own. That's not cool.
And that's
Um,
definitely a different situation when they're
but
actually
I
literally stealing somebody's art.
right, but I think that's where the issue comes up with AI art is because AI art, yeah, it's borrowing the style, but you could argue that in some cases you could argue that it is lifting similar things. It's not always identical, but I think there are certain situations where it looks pretty damn identical to other things. And I think that's
Yeah.
where you definitely have a problem. If it looks too close, it really depends on what I don't even know what copyright infringement for art looks like.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
know
obviously,
I don't know what the laws even are on that. I don't know what that means or what percentage of a painting needs to look too close
mhm,
in order for you to have in order for you to have a real argument.
Yeah.
I don't know. And I don't really even know if there is that principle, but there's other things where you argue, can the company even claim it, or does it go like, can they make
Yeah.
money off of it, and can someone sell AI art, or does it fall into, and I think that there are laws being drafted about that,
There's
whether
gonna have to be laws drafted, especially because if you think about it, eventually AI is gonna get so good you could be plug in a whole movie script. Say like
yes.
you want to see a movie and it's not made. It's your dream. Like you want to see a movie based off of the Star Wars extended universe. That's never going to happen because Disney changed the canon and did their own thing. But say you want, I want to see a Star Wars movie based off of the Thrawn trilogy,
Hmm.
and you type it into an AI prompt and it writes the movie for you and generates all the images and the characters and everything, and you could go and watch the movie.
Right. Give
Now,
me give me Death Troopers the movie.
right. Yeah, exactly. So now where do you draw the line and say where does Disney or Lucasfilm or whoever have a right to sue? If you're just doing this in your in your basement on your computer just to watch it for yourself or like show it to your friends, that's one thing. Are you going to sell it though? If you sell it, obviously then that's a problem.
Right.
But
If it's on YouTube, they could just claim monetization, but it
right,
could still exist.
right. So
Right. That's fine.
that's going to be definitely one of those things that needs to be worked out, and I think they're working on it, but who knows how long it's going to take for the stuff to actually get legalized, especially since there's a little bit bigger fish to fry right now. I think that's like you know government's least of concerns with all the shit that's going on in the world today.
Right. Or, well, the argument that I was going to make is, when is with AI paintings, do can you like can you even sell an AI painting, or does it just automatically fall into the public domain? Which this is which we have a similar which we have a case that we could base this off of in the real world, where this photographer gave a monkey it he gave the monkey a video, he gave a monkey at the zoo or something his camera, and he gave the monkey the camera to see what pictures the monkey would take. The
Yeah,
monkey happened to take a really cool picture, and he then made prints of the photo or whatever, and he tried to sell the photo. And I don't know if the zoo or whatever claimed that it's property of the zoo because it was the
right.
monkey, or whatever it was. There's some issue over who gets paid, can he get paid
Yeah,
for this, can he even sell this photo? And it was eventually ruled that because the monkey took the photo, this was not the photographer's buck to make, because he did not take the photo. Even though it was his camera, it was
yeah,
not his photo. So
yeah.
because the monkey took the photo, it then falls to the monkey. But obviously you can't really negotiate with the monkey.
Right.
So they just ruled that it had to go in the public domain, and nobody got money off of it.
Yeah. I think
Which I think that should be what happens with AI art. I think it just goes into the public domain. Nobody can make money off of it.
I
I
think
think
artists
that's
should also be allowed to sell their style for example, before he passed away, when he retired, James Earl Jones sold the rights to his voice to
Mhm.
Disney so they could continue to use his voice for Darth Vader and basically AI generate it. And they took samples of his voice, and they have obviously hundreds of hours of films and his voiceover that they could use to do it.
Yeah, which I guess that's okay, because the
Yeah.
estate made because it went to the estate.
Well, James Earl
I'm
Jones himself, before he died, actually even okayed it. He signed off on it and
Yeah.
sold the rights basically to his voice.
Yeah, which that's fine if you know you're gonna go anyway, and you're like,
Right,
"Listen, when I die, you could do whatever you want. I can't use this anymore, so
right, or
it might as
especially
well be good to my it might as well help my family."
exactly, especially if
Right?
it's going to go to help his
That's
next of
okay.
kin.
Yeah.
If Bruce
There's the
Willis is,
other. Oh, I'm sorry, you continue.
yeah, I was gonna say if Bruce Willis's family decide to do that so that they could still make money off of his image and his voice and his acting, even though he can't act anymore because of the disease that he has. He's basically not able to speak anymore, as far as I know.
Oh, that's sad.
It's really sad, but it could be good for his family, and his estate to do that, so that way they can continue to make money. You know, I mean, I'm sure he's got fuck you money anyway. It really doesn't matter,
I'm
but
sure he does.
I'm just using it as an example. How
Yes.
how that could, and you know people might want to use AI so that, and this goes to another whole philosophical argument about if this is healthy psychologically or not. But you capture your family member's voice in AI so you could still talk to them after they pass away.
Yeah, that's a little. I wouldn't want to do something like that, but I could see why some people would.
Yeah, yeah, and
To me,
again,
that's
that
to
goes
me
to a
that
whole philosophical
yeah,
question
to
of.
me that kind of draws the line. While I would like to be able to speak with some deceased relatives of mine again, while it will be nice to just say hello, to just give them a hug one more time, to
Mhm.
just call them on the phone and just ask them how they're doing. I would know that I'm not really speaking to them. This is just
Right.
something that's programmed. It's telling me what they want to hear. There
Yeah.
was an episode of Seven Deadly Sins, which was a show with Morgan Spurlock, who did what the heck was it? Super Size Me.
Mhm.
He Where it was just basically about synthetic people and just robots and stuff like that. And I don't even mean just the sex robots, which they did talk about, and that was freaking weird. But then they got into bringing people back from the dead, where they had used a woman who had passed away, or they were prepping a robot version of this person who this was just their wish, and it was very freaky to see. And people were talking to it, and it had memories that it was drawing from. It was really crazy, but it was one of those things where it's like I don't know who would want this, but not me. I mean, if that's what you want, that's fine, I guess, but it's not up to me to say what you want or what you should
Mhm.
have. But that's just something for me where I wouldn't. But what I was going to say is the counter argument to, like, the part of the other side of the coin of the James Earl Jones thing is Anthony Bourdain,
Yeah.
where on the documentary that was being done on him posthumously, to finish the narration, they made a clone of his voice, and they used it in the documentary at the end. And you could I feel like if you listen to it by itself, you would be able to tell that it was a clone, because this was a few years ago. I think it was during COVID when
Yeah.
it came out. You could probably tell if it was by itself, but with all of the other ambience from the documentary and everything, you couldn't really tell, because there was too many other things surrounding it to kind of block out the lack of nuance and things. And it was pretty good. They did not have consent, or I don't even think they had knowledge. They may have, but I
Yeah.
don't think that they had knowledge from the estate, which I think was his ex-wife and daughter. I
Yeah.
don't think they knew anything about this. And I don't know if they're still suing or if they settled, but they sued they sued a bunch of people over it. I don't know if it was the production company or what, but they sued somebody over this, who just went and decided it would be a good idea to do this.
Mhm.
And that's not cool, because one, there was no consent from anybody related to the deceased. It's not like, and neither did the deceased sign off on this either, because
Mhm.
this wasn't really a thing when he passed.
Right.
So that's there's a lot of issues with ethics.
There is a lot of ethical issues with AI
You
that
know,
need to be worked out before people get into it. Um, or we dive deeper into it rather, because we're already into it really.
yeah, I
Um,
mean, you see AI art all over the place for articles and in thumbnails and on social content and things like that, which I think some things it's okay. I think if you weren't going, if you weren't planning on subscribing to, if you weren't planning to go to Shutterstock or something where you have to pay a subscription fee, or if you need something really quick and you would have used stock footage, or or if you were going
Yeah.
to use a stock photo or something generic and you can do AI art to spice it up, I don't think it's that bad. I
Hmm.
think it's I think sometimes it's okay with concept art if you are if you're an independent person, if you're just one and you don't have much of a budget, like let's say you just have you just have a project that you're trying to work on, like let's just say you're a student who is just doing a student film just for a school project and
Hmm.
you just need some concept art, or maybe you're just trying to just put a pitch together and you have some kind of and you need concept sketches, but a concept artist is very out of budget,
Yeah.
then perhaps just to pitch it or something like that, then maybe that's okay. And using it as a thumbnail, well, I don't know about okay. That might not be the right word, but I think it's a little more understandable if you're doing it, if you're using it in a in a vacuum.
Yes.
But I think in other cases where normally you would hire a real artist to do this,
Hmm.
and now you're just clearly cutting costs,
Yeah, and
then I don't think that it's okay.
people are definitely noticing that specifically because I forget some company, I forget who it was, AAA video game company. I think for the new Crash Bandicoot, actually, or they're planning on
Oh,
doing a new Crash Bandicoot. They did a teaser picture, and it was very clearly AI generated and
see,
really
that's not
badly
cool.
AI
If it's
generated.
if it's just one person for their small YouTube channel, or they're doing it, or it's it's one person doing a tiny project, I think they're more likely to get a pass, but not in this case. Not when it's a big company who can actually fork over the money to hire a real person.
Yeah,
That's not cool. Or the other issue is the, the other issue another more recent issue is with bands. Should bands use it? You and I have discussed this privately, but the big example here is the band Pestilence. They,
yeah,
for their latest album, which I think was a compilation because they had been around for, I think it was like a 30-year celebratory compilation or something like that. They they used AI generated art for the cover and they
right,
wanted to do it and they really liked it, and they got a ton of backlash because one, they weren't releasing this independently. They had a label putting this out.
right.
So even if it was their idea and they thought it was cool, the money could still be spent on an artist, and it's I don't know how royalties work. I don't know if the artist gets a cut of the album when it sells or if they just get paid the one time and whatever their rate is and they do the art.
It probably depends on how they negotiate, whatever their
Probably.
thing
I
is.
yeah, it probably comes down to to whether or not the artist has representation
Hmm.
and what they can negotiate. But it's also one thing if it's one thing if you wanted to use it as liner art or concept art to just put in as just a bonus of just, hey, we just did an AI art thing that we just threw in like a bonus sheet of just concepts before we settled on what we wanted, and then we told the artist to do that and we just gave it to them as a template. I think that's a little bit more acceptable because the end
See,
product, because you paid an artist for the end product. But
I
then again,
guess
you could also have paid a concept artist
right,
because it's a label. So it's
and what
slippery slope.
why do you have to pay an artist? If you have the tools to, and here's the thing, and I think this is a big reason why people are freaking out a little bit over AI, and I think it's the same thing that happened when like digital audio workstations uh, started becoming more and more common. The gatekeepers freak out because now all of a sudden they're not going to be able to be the gatekeepers anymore because you're
Mhm.
democratizing art. You're making it accessible to people who don't necessarily know how to do art themselves. And normally they would have to pay an artist a lot of money to do an album cover or a logo or whatever. Now they could do it themselves with AI generated, and obviously that's going to freak people out because they're like, oh no, I'm going to, now I'm going to lose my graphic design gig because everyone's using AI generated art. Here's the thing: not everyone's going to use it. For one,
Mhm.
you're always going to have people that are going to want real human artists because again, the uncanny valley thing of AI, some people it does look weird. So you're always going to have the demand for real human made art. And
Yes.
maybe not like into the
Well,
far future when it's so indistinguishable that you wouldn't be able to tell anyway. But
or
again,
just
I think
human made anything.
well, and again,
Any
yeah,
human made
exactly,
art or a voice or anything like that. It's always
exactly,
going to be in demand, at least until it is totally
because
indistinguishable.
you're going to have a movement for artisanal things like that because yeah, people eventually in the future when we have robots building everything, robots building chairs and furniture and all that, and people are gonna still want to buy human made like things, furniture or whatever, because it becomes like an artisanal thing. It's like, oh, someone actually crafted this and put work into it and did it.
And those
Whereas
things might even be
the
worth more money
right,
than they
they
are
will be
now
exactly, they will
because
be.
it's going to be a rarefied skill.
Yes, exactly, and yeah, so people
Similar
will still buy
to similar to plumbing, right?
so exactly,
Similar to trade jobs or anything. Now trade jobs are you make a lot more money for doing for having a trade job than you used to because there were
exactly,
more of them and more people doing them. We're now because of the whole college propaganda thing in the last 20 years, you don't find a whole lot of plumbers, so the plumbers can charge whatever the hell they want and
exactly,
guess what? Your toilet's broken. What choice do you have? You can either pay the plumber whatever they're asking for, or you buy a new toilet. And then when you buy a new toilet, guess what? You got to call the plumber to install it because you don't know how to do it.
exactly,
So you kind of don't have a choice.
yeah, and so you're gonna have that in artwork too, where people are gonna like, oh yeah, people who can't afford it, yeah, they could use AI and make an album cover or whatever they need and not have to pay for it a lot of money, or where they pay for whatever the AI software is, or whatever. But you're
I
still
think
gonna
you just
have
get sorry,
but I was
continue.
gonna say you're still gonna have plenty of people that are gonna want to buy an actual like human drawn thing, and it's gonna you those artists will be able to charge a premium for that.
Yeah. I think I think you really just draw the line when a big corporation gets involved. If it's a corporation spending the money where
Yeah,
then it becomes that's not cool. You could have just spent the money on something and you could have probably written it off as a business expense.
but
Why
look,
didn't you just why didn't you just
corporations are
do
going to do
that?
that no matter what.
Yeah.
Corporations are going to do that. Whatever they
If
can cut
I
costs and whatever they can do, eventually they're going to automate everything, and there's not going to be human workers at corporations anymore. It's all
right,
going to be robots.
that's just businesses. I mean, I'm almost shocked that it like I could see I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I think the future of what a job hunt looks like because everything is a bullshit ATS software now, and you almost never talk to a real person, or they make too many hoops for you to jump through to even get hired.
Right,
Right? Like nobody making minimum wage should have to go through 10 rounds of interviews. It's insane. You're just
right,
trying to make you know 50K or whatever. You're not trying to and this is an entry level position. You're not trying to become the CEO or something. You don't need to get vetted like this. There's no reason for this. It's just a lot of stupid weed out things because ATS software and LinkedIn made it too easy for people to they made it too easy for 1,000 people to just apply to a job now.
right,
So there's like a glut of talent and the so they had to make up all this bullshit just to get it out of there. But anyway, I think that the future of how someone gets a job ends up being that they put their they put their resume in a job site. There's no such thing as a full-time job. It all becomes contract work.
Right.
And then so it really just becomes staffing agencies, or the job site is a staffing agency all in one, and the algorithm just matches up your resume to a contract, and it just asks you, hey, we have 12 jobs for you, which one do you want? And then you pick and choose which job you want. You're doing whatever tasks it assigns you to do for whatever the company needs, and for whatever the duration is, and that's that. And people just kind of have longer periods of unemployment, but there but I mean, in order for this to work, there needs to be some kind of universal basic income.
Yeah.
So we're not, which I'm not sure at this rate, it's
Well,
probably not going to happen, but I
this is
don't
the
really
argument
know.
for universal basic income, is that
Yes.
eventually there's not going to be factory jobs that are, human factory jobs. It'll be all be done by machines. And so you're going to have to pay people somehow because there's not going to be the jobs anymore.
I mean,
And
either that or just you create a new currency or barter system, and you just have to back things on that.
right.
But anyway, that's my thought on that one. I think to get back to AI, really, well, I mean, we never really left AI, but I think, I think when it comes to artwork, I mean, even to get back to the pestilence thing, the end result was pestilence and the label came to the backlash, and they hired a human to do the artwork,
Yeah.
and they showed the album cover, and then Pestilence just doubled down and said, "Here you go. We did what you asked. We got a real person to do the artwork. By the way, we think that the AI art was better." So
Yeah.
people were still mad that they doubled down on it, which I think, you know, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not wrong. There's no wrong opinions here, but I don't think you should have said that. I think you should have kept that opinion to yourself, because,
Yeah.
you've already pissed people off enough.
Yeah.
Now they're probably double mad at you.
Yeah.
And and now that you've said that, I'm sure a bunch of these people wish that you had just released it with the way it was with the AI art, and
Yeah.
then people would have just made a fuss about it in the beginning, and they either wouldn't have cared, or they would have eventually forgotten about it, or eventually it would have just been a conversational piece where somebody would have been like, "Hey, what did you think about that Pestilence album?" Or, "Oh, I thought this compilation was pretty decent. Hey, they
Hmm.
used AR for that one, right? Yeah, they did. Ah,
Yeah.
all right." That's pretty much the gist of the that might even be the full conversation that you have before you move on to another band, album, or song, or topic.
Right.
And that's all that it really would have become, because everything just moves very quickly now.
Well,
But that's that's on that. I think if it's an individual part, I really think that that the biggest issue comes more from, and I hadn't thought about the gatekeeping thing, which that's actually a really good point. But I think the issue is really, I think it really just comes down to when someone who can afford it decides to use who can clearly afford to use a person, chooses to use AI in art, then then it's messed up. But I think if it's an individual, or if it's a smaller group or an indie group, I don't think it's as big of a deal. Does it still suck? Yes,
well, I'll
but
give
I
you a good
don't think.
example. Is I, when I have like my D&D characters that I want to make a nice portrait for, for if I play online sometimes, haven't in a while, but but I can't draw for shit, for one, and I don't have the money to hire an artist just to draw my D&D character for me. So AI is a really good tool in that regard. It's like, oh, I can make a cool portrait for my D&D character, and I'm not selling it, I'm not doing anything, I'm just using it for my own personal use, basically, for if I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons.
Right. Or another example, for this podcast, we either get the art how I normally get it, where I'm grabbing the main image of whatever the subject is from the internet.
Yeah.
So it's the movie poster, let's just say, for the Austin Powers thing or for Curb Your
Right.
Enthusiasm,
Right.
just to name recent things. I grabbed the poster for one of the seasons, or the DVD cover or whatever. This is in the public domain anyway. They can't sue, HBO can't sue me for using the promotional image.
Well, it's
because
covered under fair use.
Right. So I could just go do our thing, and that's the image. Or
Right.
I could just choose to do a Midjourney thing for Curb Your Enthusiasm. I think that's okay. Or for a blog post, I've already paid. Like, normally for a blog post, I will use the artwork for whatever the host is. So WordPress, Wix, Squarespace, whatever their basic store, whatever they have, whatever you get with the paid subscription to have your domain hosted on the site.
Yeah.
I've already paid for that. I'm not paying an extra $1 per photo or anything. So when I do a blog post, I can just choose to do AI. I could just choose to do AI art. And now they have AI generated art as like a feature for all of these things anyway.
Yeah.
So I could just go and use that, and I think that's fine too. It's not anything I would have been paying an artist for if this wasn't even a thing anyway.
And I'm not
it's not because I'm
against paying an artist.
It's not because I'm a cheap bastard. It's just because this wasn't the plan that I had in mind. If I had planned to use an artist, I would have used an artist.
Right. It's also expensive to use an artist, and I would like to throw my support behind an artist, but it's not a feasible thing especially for like an indie band or a small podcast to do that.
That too. I can't go. I'm not going to pay an artist $250 every time I write a blog.
Exactly.
That just does not make any sense.
No.
Where I suppose, depending on the artist used, an indie band could use an artist for their artwork. They could get maybe a guy from their college or something, or somebody in the graphic arts program, or they could get a cheaper artist who has a similar style to other artists that they would like to get but can't afford. Like, for example, when thrash metal was making its comeback, people were going to Tom Martin who was in Lich King, versus going to Ed Repka because he had a similar style and he was cheaper. And in some cases he was better because people discovered that Ed Repka was just copying and pasting,
recycling his own art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which that was kind of messed up.
Yeah.
Versus Tom, who was giving you an original piece every time and for less money. So, yeah, kind of like, there's nothing wrong with that. You're still paying an artist. You're just not paying the artist you're not paying the artist that you would have preferred had you had the money. You're just going somewhere else for it.
Right.
Where an indie band who's doing a demo, God knows how much and they went to a studio, God knows how much the studio costs for everything. Let's just say they had somebody egos butted heads like they do. Mm-hmm. Somebody kept wanting to do a million takes of something because they felt that whatever it was that they recorded wasn't the best version of whatever they recorded, where everybody just said, nobody cares.
Yeah.
But they ended up going over budget. They ended up going over time, and they racked up the studio bill another $1,000. then it's however much then it's however much the mixing and mastering costs,
Right.
and then it's, oh crap, we need a cover, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Suppose they go to a regular artist that they know, or it's a friend who happens to be an art major, and then the person just does it for free because they're a nice person and we're all friends, so they do the cover for free. Even if the band said, "Oh, we'll just pay you a couple $100, like how much would you like?"
Right.
and like we could give you 200, but we can't really do anything higher. And the person says, "No, you guys are my friends. I would support you guys, so you could just take this art for free." There, like, what would the difference have been out if they had used AI art there? Really nothing outside of just the personal level of respect and the courtesy of approaching a person first.
Yeah.
That's really what the difference is. It's just that human interaction that's the difference.
Yeah.
Which I get it, and it's a really cool and it is a very neat thing. But what if you just don't have any friends who are in the art program,
Right.
right? What if you
Exactly.
really just do not have the budget? What if you only have $200 to spend on art? No artist that you come across will do it for $200. Or and that could be for a few reasons. Maybe the artist, maybe what you're looking for just goes out of budget, or maybe all the artists in your area or all
Mhm.
the artists you're looking at, their minimum is just too high for your maximum. That
Right.
happens. So what are you going to do? Either you're going to try to learn how to do it and you're going to do it yourself, or you have this tool here. You might as well use the tool because it's going to give you something better than what you can do.
Mhm.
I think that's fair. I think that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's what it is. It really is a tool, and
Same thing with like t-shirts and stuff like that. If they're
exactly.
just if they're out of budget and you really have, that's pretty much the only one of the few choices you have, then yeah, I think it's okay as a last resort, and I think it's okay if you're going to use it in a more private sense sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. It really depends on the intent. I think that's really where it gets into the gray area, is the intent behind it.
It's the intent, and again, people need to treat it as it is, a tool. It's not going to be a replacement. It's going to be a tool that people are going to use. And instead of panicking about it, it's like, oh, you should think, how can I utilize it instead? Or if you're an artist and you want to not use AI and you want to do your own thing, then do it and market it that way. Market yourself as, I don't use AI art. I draw everything myself, and this is the quality, and I'm going to charge based on that. You get what you pay for in everything.
Yeah.
So, you want good quality art, then go to an actual artist. Don't use AI.
Yeah. Also, just to bring up this other recent controversy is the Studio Ghibli. We would
Hmm.
be foolish to not talk about this. And
Yeah.
where do you stand on that? Where it's a model, it's an LLM that has been trained specifically with the Studio Ghibli stuff to do this art. Now, maybe it hasn't been trained specifically with this art. Maybe it has without the consent of the art studio, right? If it
Yeah.
is if it's being trained off of copyrighted work, and and this applies to novels and other things, when it's an LLM that's being trained by copyrighted work, this is not the user, this is the company, right?
Right.
This is the training
Right.
device, and then this is what it spits out. Now, when it comes to the user, if the user is selling it, I don't think that that's very cool, and I don't really I but the issue with the company and the LLM consent, what happens there?
Right.
When does
Uh,
this become a problem?
well,
What it,
and
like as far as the AI companies and the LLMs, where does this become an issue?
I think it's a really complex issue, and I I'm not sure if I have an opinion on it one way or another yet, because it's still so kind of in its infancy. And you know, you could make the argument, yeah, they're training it based off of Studio Ghibli, so shouldn't Studio Ghibli be able to consent to that, or have, or at least get some kind of royalty payment based on that?
Yeah,
But
I
then
think they should.
you could also make the argument, if someone's in art school and they're training off of, the style of Studio Ghibli or any kind of art style, should that student be, or the school be required to pay them too, because they
Hmm.
used their art as inspiration, or to educate? It's
That's
kind of
true because it's not like you could just teach a course specifically on Studio Ghibli and Japanese anime art and
right,
manga without and then you have to go to all of these art studios in Japan and say, "Hey, we need to," like, you go to their licensing department and you say, "Hey, we need to license the art so that we
right,
could teach this class." That's
yeah.
kind of that sounds crazy.
And conversely, if someone makes a fan art of something in the style of Studio Ghibli or in the style of Akira Toriyama, someone makes, oh, I drew Star Wars characters in the style of Akira Toriyama, so they look like Dragon Ball Z characters, that
Mhm.
style. But they drew it themselves. Should that person, be sued, or be required to pay the estate of Akira Toriyama because they used his art style? Like, where do you draw the line where
Right.
you
Well, I
could
mean,
claim intellectual property?
I think on that argument, I think if it fell on Disney, they would just sue them anyway.
Yeah, well, that,
For
yeah,
God's
of course,
sakes, your kid can't even draw Mickey Mouse and put it on your refrigerator. God
yeah.
forbid, then they'll
But there's
find
that
out and sue you.
there's that episode of Family Guy where Peter, or not Peter, Stewie and Brian are going through the multiverse, and they go to the Disney universe, and everything is drawn in the style of old, Disney cartoons.
Uh,
Should Seth MacFarlane have been sued for that? Where do you draw the line?
right. I don't know. I think when it comes to I think when it comes to how the algorithms and LLMs are being trained, I think copyright is clearly an issue.
I think
It's an issue more for it's well, I'm not gonna say it's an issue more for anything because I really don't know.
it's a
But
way more complicated issue than people are making it out to be. That's the
it
big
is.
problem.
I think it's more black and white when it's publishing anecdotes and when it's taking things from articles that are already written and it's clear plagiarism.
Right.
I think that's more cut and dry. This is
Yes.
obviously plagiarism. We already have several laws about this. You are clearly you're clearly doing plagiarism right now.
Right.
Right? That's black and white. Where this is it plagiarism or is it a person who's being inspired?
Right.
Right? Cuz you could be inspired to write like Ernest Hemingway and you could write in a similar style, but as long as you're not using as long as you're not taking things from his novels word for word and throwing it into yours and trying to pass it off as your own, then it's okay. Even if you have written a book in the style of Ernest Hemingway exactly how and people might be fooled into thinking that it's a real lost Ernest Hemingway novel because of how identical your writing is, that's it's still not plagiarism, but which that's kind of the human equivalent of an LLM
Right.
for the art that we're talking about, drawing something exactly to a T in the style,
And,
right?
and again, where do you, because you could, all fantasy of the last 50 years is based on Tolkien.
Yeah.
So should J.R.R. Tolkien's estate sue Warcraft, the makers of Warcraft, because they have orcs and dwarves and all that? Like, where do, again, this goes all back to fair use and what could be considered a derivative work, what could be considered fair use. It's a way more complicated issue than most people on Twitter want to
Yeah.
say it is.
Yeah, honestly, the biggest issue with social media is there are billions of people, so many most of them are pretty goddamn stupid,
Most of
and
them are also
they
bots.
now have the voice. Yeah, they could be robots too. So they're AI. Anyway, it's it's just such a fascinating subject
Yeah.
because there's it's not black and white.
No, and it's still in its infancy. People say, "Oh, AI is getting so advanced." Yeah, it is getting advanced, but we're still years off of imagine what it's going to be in 10 years,
Yeah, it's gonna be
what,
crazy.
or 20 years. It's going to be so much way beyond what we could even imagine.
Right.
So,
And once we get to the AGI thing, when we have real AI, not this chatbot bullshit, when we
mhm.
have the real deal and we figure out quantum computing,
What we have is virtual intelligence, not artificial
yes, I
intelligence.
think that's what they should brand it as, and that's what it
Yes.
really is.
Yeah.
But I think when we have the real thing, is there going to be sentience with it? We don't know.
I think eventually there will be. And
Eventually,
that's
yes.
another whole mess of philosophical questions that
Yes.
are going to have to be answered. And it's important to talk about it now while it's in its infancy because you don't want to be struggling to catch up with this thing 10 years from now.
Unfortunately, that's all policymakers seem to do is just struggle to catch up with things.
Yeah.
Because, well, one, I mean, there's a lot of issues with that stuff, but the main issue is one, it's people who understand it less than you and I do, talking
Uh-huh.
to these companies who are lobbying to get their way, and they're just telling them, "Oh no, it's not so bad. It's here."
Mhm.
And then but then other people are trying to educate these people who really know what's going on, and they're kind of listening and they're kind of doing things, but then they're also looking at the money that the lobbyers pay,
Yeah.
and these companies who have more money because there's a big lobbying budget,
Yeah.
and it's really you can't really get shit done because because well the problem is just that money is allowed to be in politics, and that's really what the problem is.
Yeah.
Once you get the money out of politics and you stop lobbying and all that stuff, then these people will actually be able to do that, and they'll also stop with their insider trading bullshit. And
Hopefully.
the well, maybe. I mean, what you need to do is kind of do what they did in Singapore with with their officials is they pay them very handsomely and they give them real punishments if they do insider trading. They're not allowed to trade stocks. They're not allowed to even touch the stock market.
Yeah.
And but they're paid like $3 million a year, and they just say, "Hey, we gave you a bunch of money. Just sit down, shut up, do your job. Don't you can't invest in anything. You can't even your family don't even look at they can't even look at the stock market. So don't you can't do any insider trading nonsense or we really will throw the book at you.
Yeah.
And we're not going to fine you $2,000 or whatever bullshit it is. Where we will have like we're going to hand your ass to you
Yeah.
because Singapore don't play. And for the most part they get shit done and they're not it's a much less corrupt system.
Yeah.
Because they pay them a lot of money to just shut up and do their job, and they also are being paid so much money that they shouldn't have to look elsewhere to make it.
Right.
And I think that's as much as I hate politicians, I think that's the way to go so that you could at least try to stop them from being well, you can't stop them, but you can definitely curb it better
Yeah.
if you get rid of all that stuff and you pay them a lot of money to just shut up and do their jobs. And
Mhm.
you give them proper term limits too in Congress.
Yeah.
That also needs to happen. But
Yeah.
anyway, I know we said we wouldn't get political, but that's
Botch.
that's the gist. That's the closest that I'm going to get to any other thing going on. So I hope people can understand that.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what needs to be done. So that's one of the things that need to be done so that we can move a lot swifter on AI policy and other things. See, I'm bringing it back. I'm bringing
Yeah.
it back around. There was a point to this. But I'm not really sure what'll happen. And in the next 5, 10 years, or who knows what. I mean, even and this is an issue with voiceover a lot because
Yeah.
people are getting, even though people like me are consenting with companies that that have better reputations of doing the right thing. Like they will ask me, "Hey, this type of company for this project or whatever, they're interested in using in their like, is it okay if we send them your sample?" And I either say yes or no.
Right.
And if they choose it, eventually, if they choose to do that, then that's cool. And they basically license the use of my voice and I can get paid on that and I get passive income from that.
Hmm.
It's not a lot of money, but every once in a blue moon, it's, oh, hey, here's $100 or whatever.
Right.
It's just beer money basically.
Yeah.
But hey, it's money I didn't have. So,
Exactly.
um, but I have no idea if this company I have no idea what happens tomorrow if this company gets sold to somebody who just doesn't want to go through that process or is just going to sell my voice off to somebody else who was just using it for nefarious purposes and they change their policy and now they just own my voice and I can no longer make money off of it, right? I have no idea or or anything like that. I really don't know.
Yeah.
But there's also other companies where they are just harvesting voices off of things that you've done already, and then they're just training their own algorithms and they're stealing your voice, and
Hmm.
then you wind up on something that you didn't even know about that's been around for like 5 years, and you only found out because somebody else told you that exists and thought that you did a good job, and you're just and you're just sitting there going, "I didn't do that." And then you listen to it and you're like, "Oh, god damn it. There was this one of the biggest issues is this one of the biggest problems or cases with this, and there's a ton of them. This woman, Bev Standing, she did a thing. She found out that, and then later it was being used as the voice of TikTok. Somebody patted her on the back and said, "Hey, you're the voice of TikTok. That's awesome." And she said, "I didn't do nothing for TikTok."
Yeah.
And they had her voice. They did all these things, and she had to sue the shit out of them.
Yeah.
And I think they eventually settled for something, but I don't know what the amount is. I'm sure there were NDAs involved and all that stuff, but because she can't really talk about what happened next, so I'm sure that there's a
Right.
bunch of things. But it's freaking crazy, man. You could wind up on a bunch of things,
Yep.
and that's not cool either.
Well,
Or and even now, like the other big scam that I wanted to mention not is that they is that if you have voice activation on your bank account, first of all, don't do
yeah.
that. Undo that, turn that off, tell them not to do it because that's the easiest way that people can get a sample of your voice or a lot of telemarketer calls that, well, not even telemarketers, a lot of scam calls that you get if you pick up from whatever area code. Usually it's the closest area code to where it thinks you are. I
Yeah.
have a strange area code not in the state that I live in. So the minute that I see that zip code, I already know that it's a scam, so I don't pick it up
Yeah.
because I have never met anybody. Well, I've never been to this place, so I don't have friends from there.
Yeah.
I've only met people in passing who happen to have lived there at some point, and they just ask about it, and they say, "Hey, you have this phone number. What part did you grow up in?" Never. I never grew up there. I
Yeah.
never lived in there. I never stepped foot in there. I never even had a layover at the airport in this place. I just, well, why did you keep, how did you get this and why did you keep this? I don't know. This was the number they gave me. I thought it was funny and it's a great conversation piece, obviously.
Hmm.
So I kept it. And this is also helping me now avoid scam calls. So there's double, triple benefits to this thing.
Yeah.
And, but if you pick up the but if you do pick up the phone, suppose you do pick up the phone, there won't be anything on the other side. You'll just say hello, hello,
Yeah.
and that's all that they need. They're recording you on the other line,
Yeah.
and then they have that. They use that sample to call any bank to try to find out what bank you're part of, and see if you have voice activation, so that you could just get into they could just get into your bank account scot free, and the
Yeah.
bank thinks that it's you, so they get your money before they can transfer your money before anything without even before anybody knows that there's an issue, because it won't even trip the bank up, because they'll think that you consented to take out all of your money for some reason, or
Yeah.
every other day you've just decided to withdraw $200 for about 8 weeks, and your limit is 250. So we didn't bother to contact you. We thought it was you. All kinds of crazy shit like that happens. So you
Yeah.
have to be very careful.
Yeah.
But that's the way the world is.
Yep.
I think it's just gonna be a wild freaking ride, and we have to see what laws are being made. There's a lot of laws and policies being worked on, some that have passed, others that are just taking too damn long.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the other side of the coin is that they're just not fast enough to keep up with technology with policymakers. So they need to have a blanket provision in place for when things improve and things get crazier. Like, it's already bad enough with deep fakes. We hadn't even talked about AI deep fakes.
Yeah.
Or just it's gonna get worse with that stuff. So it's gonna be a wild
Yeah.
time
And that's
until we
they're
have.
those that they're really kind of working on laws for.
Yeah, because it's a problem for them and it
Yeah.
impacts them directly. So of course now that's what they're all working bipartisan on. It's
Yeah.
really they won't really the only time where they'll really get off their asses and get to work on it is when it affects them
Yeah,
directly,
of course.
because they're fucking assholes. And
Yep.
like we said with the just do the Singapore thing, and make it their business to give a shit, and then maybe they will.
Maybe.
Yeah, again, I use the term maybe because who
Yeah,
the fuck
loosely.
knows? Yeah, they're already corrupt enough to begin with. So what's the point? I mean, let's face it, you really only get into politics if you want power.
Exactly.
No, most normal people will not do it. Maybe your local congressman. Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
Or
like your
your,
local
mayor or
congressman,
whatever.
or I wouldn't even say the mayor. Let's not fucking talk
Well,
about mayors.
not the mayor of New York, but if you're like in a small town.
Yeah, maybe your town mayor or your town councilman or something like that. Like, yeah, I would say your councilman probably covers enough of it, where those people who are, or your district representative or something like that. The small time politicians, I think. I'm not saying they don't also get corrupt, but I think they're less corrupt than anybody in fucking Washington.
Yeah. No, Washington is definitely the most corrupt by
It is,
far.
and it has been for the longest time.
Yeah.
But we won't go there.
Yeah.
At least not further than we've already gone. But there just needs to be a lot of laws around this shit, and I would like to open it up to the court, and anybody who wants to either send us an email, sign up for the Patreon so they can get into the Discord, or if you just want to shoot the shit on YouTube and subscribe and all that stuff, like, that's cool with me, and I would like to have a fun back and forth with people. So let me know what you thought of what we had to say
Mhm.
and your feelings on things like that.
Like,
And
comment, and subscribe.
yeah, I guess do all that bullshit if you want to. You don't really have to, but it would be fun to see what folks have to say about this topic. Anyway, this has been Why Does This Exist? I've been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
And remember, question everything, which I think we did on this
Yeah,
episode. I
we
think we
did
finally
question everything.
I think we finally questioned something, let alone everything.
Good night, everybody.
All right.